Welcome to Steve Means Business, the podcast dedicated to promoting and highlighting small business all across America. As an entrepreneur who has launched many small businesses in various industries over the years and blessed with the gift of gab, Steve was made for this podcast. Let's do this.
Welcome to another episode of Steve Means Business, the podcast dedicated to promoting small businesses all across America. Today's episode undoubtedly will be one of the most important episodes I ever record. We're talking cancer and actually a company that's going to defeat cancer. I'm here at the offices of Calviri, a biotech life sciences company here in Phoenix, Arizona. And their goal, plain and simple, guys, is to end and eradicate cancer, period. How great is that? Calviri has actually invented a vaccine that prevents cancer in dogs, not just treat or detect, but actually prevents the cancer from ever happening in the first place. That's a game changer. That's a difference maker. And I want everybody to know about it. Say hello to Stephen Johnson, the CEO and co-founder of Calviri. He's kind enough to host us here at his office, and we're going to talk all about the great things they're doing at Calviri. Stephen, thanks for having me here today.
Thanks for putting me on.
You bet. Tell us all about the great work you're doing here with Calviri.
Well, it's great what we're trying to do. And so we started about 15 years ago as a company dedicated to try to make a vaccine to prevent cancer in people. And the rationale is that the cancer field looked pretty dismal. There were very expensive drugs being developed that had minimal impact on cancer patients. And unfortunately, that story hasn't changed much in the 15 years we've been working on this vaccine. Mm-hmm. So we decided, and I headed up an invention center, and we decided what could we do, the best thing we could do to invent to stop cancer or at least improve the situation was to have a vaccine that would prevent it from starting in the first place, to treat it like an infection. Mm-hmm. And you have to get the vaccine ahead of time if you're going to block an infection. Sure. That's the only way they work. So that's what we set out to do. And we got sidetracked a little bit because there wasn't a lot of enthusiasm to help us on that on the human side. So we decided to go to dogs first.
I mean, what a noble cause. And we love our dogs. I think there's something like 90 million dogs in the United States. We lead the world in all the countries with the most dogs. We all, like I said, our dogs are our buddies. They're our companions. And unfortunately, we hear, I don't know if it's technically the biggest killer, but you just hear it's so prevalent in dogs. I've lost 2 dogs to cancer. You could talk to almost anybody. They'll tell you a story about they lost a dog to cancer. So I think it's the nobility of it, but also the what a great way to, from an effectiveness standpoint, to really make a difference and, going to that aspect of working with canines, and it could help us. And we're going to talk more about this as we get into it. It could get us back on track, having an impact from the human perspective as well. Mm-hmm. I think that's great. So the first thing when I heard of this, I said, okay, is it a yearly vaccine? How does it, like a flu vaccine I would get or you would get? How does it work? And I guess one of the big questions everybody would love to know is, tell us about the study you just concluded, the efficacy rate, the prognosis, the forecast. Tell us all about the great things that can and will happen with this.
So I wish we got into this for noble causes, but that wasn't why. We got into this because it's very practical. As you mentioned, there's 90 million dogs in the United States that are well taken care of. Many of them get yearly checkups. They're well managed, but they suffer cancer at actually a higher rate than people do. And most of their cancers are discovered at late stage because they don't complain. They don't have regular screening method things like mammography. So the impact you could have in that field would be much better. The regulatory pathway is a little simpler for dogs than for people, but the market is quite large, the market potential for a dog vaccine. So what we envisioned was a vaccine that you would get on a regular basis, just like you get your distemper vaccine for your dogs. Mm-hmm. It probably costs $250 to $300 to the owner. Mm-hmm. And we envision now that you get a boost every 2 years.
And we would get these vaccines as owners right at our local veterinarian.
No, you not as an owner. You wouldn't take it as an owner. You might be tempted.
Right.
You're not supposed to.
Right. I did eat one of Archie's treats one time for kicks and giggles to see what would happen. But right, we would get for the dog. We would get the vaccine at our local veterinarian.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And we probably recommend that you start getting it when they're about 4 to 5 years old, because the take-up of cancer incidence is right about 6 years for most dogs.
That's about the sweet spot?
Yeah, so you don't want to have it before that incident.
And unfortunately, there's a couple of breeds that I just read, like the Bernese Mountain Dog, which is just such a lovable breed. And I'm a lab guy myself. I've had a bunch of them, but the Bernese is such a friendly, it's like a golden, basically. It's such a loving dog. But I think they have like a life expectancy of like less than 7 years old. It's a very short life expectancy. And there's some breeds that have that, unfortunately.
Yeah, the dogs are very interesting. They have a wide range of cancer incidences, and that difference can be up to fourfold between dogs that have low cancer incidence, like Chihuahuas, and cancers and mountain dogs, which have a much higher rate of cancer.
Or even golden retrievers, which is one of the greatest breeds ever, and such a friendly breed, but they have a very high rate of cancer. And tell me if I have my numbers right. I believe, because I heard some of the stats you guys had yesterday in your webinar. The study just concluded. It was 5 years. It was 800 dogs, roughly. And I believe you guys said you had an efficacy rate. I think I heard the number 41%. And I'll remember a number because it was Tom Seaver, the great pitcher for my hometown New York Mets. He wore number 41, and I'll remember that number forever. But I think that was the number. And tell us about the results and why you're so optimistic of what could be in the future even better results.
So we spent quite a bit of time doing what's called preclinical work to figure out whether this approach that we were taking would work. We had to invent a machine to actually develop the vaccine. And so we did all this work. But the only thing that's really going to convince people is preventing cancer in a real situation. And that's why we did the clinical trial on dogs. So these are not research dogs. These were pet owner dogs that enrolled. The owners decided to enroll the dogs. They got the information, enrolled their dogs into our trial. We screened them for cancer first. We wanted to, as best we can, make sure they didn't have latent cancer, because this is to prevent cancer.
Right.
If they already have a cancer, this wouldn't work, probably. So we screened them all extensively, enrolled them, and put them into two groups. One group got the vaccine, the other group got a mock vaccine.
Okay.
So 400 in each arm. And then every 6 months, we screened them again to see if they had cancer, and just counted the number of cancers that turned up. And what we found, the trial just ended in May, and what we found is that, first of all, the vaccine was safe. There doesn't seem to be any adverse events.
That's
so
good.
that was the first issue that you had to settle. So, because we'll be giving this to healthy dogs, or at least dogs that don't have cancer.
Right.
So we got to make sure it's very safe. And then the other was, and this is the big deal, is that in the dogs that responded to the vaccine, only about 75% of the dogs had a good immune response to the vaccine. But in those dogs, there was about a 40% reduction in tumor incidence. So that's our gold bar. And if it would have been 10%, that would have been okay. Because everybody thought you couldn't get anything.
Right. This was the first rodeo, if you will, right?
So this was our breakthrough. And so now it means that what was thought to be impossible is possible. And now we just need to improve on it.
A couple of follow-up questions. Were any No, that's okay. Were any breeds more receptive to this than others? Did you notice any difference in some of the breeds? And then how and why are you so optimistic that you could bump that 40 or 41% number even higher?
Okay. So relative to breeds, most of the dogs, 70% of the dogs we enrolled were mixed breeds. So, and the most prevalent breed dog was golden retrievers. But even there, the numbers weren't large enough that we could parse out any differences between breeds. So that will remain to have a bigger study. And the second question was whether we think we can improve it on this and why. Well, we designed this, we had to design this vaccine over 6 years ago. And in that 6 years, we've learned a lot about how to improve the vaccine. And we've done a lot of preclinical work, and we know at 5 things that we know that we could do that we've shown preclinically worked very well to improve the vaccine. We have different components into the vaccine. We have an improved adjuvant. We want to increase the dose. We gave a dose of the vaccine that was too low for older dogs. These were all old dogs that we enrolled into the trial.
Okay.
And as you know, for those of you that have had the shingles vaccine, your shingles vaccine has about 4 times the dose of the vaccine the same vaccine given to younger people.
Right.
Because older people's immune systems need just a bigger kick to get started. So we should have done that for the dogs, and we didn't. So we have those 5 things that we're going to bring to the USDA to ask whether we could incorporate into our new vaccine and improve it. And we're pretty sure from our preclinical work, we can increase the number of dogs that actually respond to the vaccine and increase the breadth of the tumors that we prevent. Because we don't prevent all tumors. Some tumors we had no effect on.
Okay.
So we're pretty sure we can improve on that.
Which were the tumors that you had the most effectiveness with?
Also was on hemangiosarcoma, which is a very deadly, rare vaccine in people, rare tumor in people, but very prevalent in dogs. Hemangiosarcoma, mast cell tumors, and thyroid tumors.
Okay. And we're going to show a couple of props here that I think are going to help everybody watching this here. And one thing I also picked up as I was doing some further research and reading on Calviri. So you've got 3. The prevention is clearly the number one goal. Like you said, prevent in the first place. You don't have to treat or detect it later. But you do have products that will take care of diagnostic and therapeutics as well. Is that correct?
That's right.
So speak to that if you can.
So along the way, in order to do the vaccine and facilitate it, we had to develop a diagnostic, and particularly a diagnostic for picking up cancer at an early stage. And so something we never planned to do, but we had to figure out how to make chips with computer chips, basically with biology on them rather than semiconductors, circuitry. So if you look at this wafer, you can see those little squares in there.
Yeah, I do see the patterns in it. Yeah.
Yeah. So those little squares, each one of those can put a drop of blood on and read out the antibodies that were generated against the person's or dog's tumors on just looking at what's the pattern on that square. And so that was a big Herculean task. We had to take Intel machinery, readjust it, and make it do chemistry that's biology rather than semiconductors. Took us about 10 years to figure out how to make that to work. But now we have that working. Our first product will be commercially a diagnostic for the sensitive detection of early tumors in dogs.
When will the first product be available for dog owners to?
Okay, so the diagnostic, that will depend on our partners in this.
And I'm going to get into that in a moment.
But we're hoping to be able to have the diagnostic available early next year.
Okay, Q1 or 2? Or
I hope so.
Okay, so let's talk about, and I'll call it the elephant in the room. They can't do this for free, guys. I mean, this is such a noble cause, and this is what's better than eradicating cancer. It's hard to think of something better than that. But this requires money. This requires funding. And you just started a Start Engine campaign, if I understand it right, a couple of weeks ago, to really reach out to whether it's to private entities, government or federal entities, nonprofits, whatever the case may be, whatever the entity or the vehicle is, at the risk of being blunt, and that's how I am, we here at Calviri, or you at Calviri, they need money to make this happen. And this can't happen without funding. And so tell us a little bit about the campaign that you're launching, how it all ties in to where you can produce these vaccines and produce these solutions to end and treat cancer.
Yeah, sure, Steve. So our funding to date has been, because we're doing such out-of-the-box stuff, our funding to date has come basically all from our board members and friends of our board members. It's all private investors.
Okay.
We did apply for grants from the National Cancer Institute and others, but they were all rejected. It's a little too far out for conventional grant mechanisms. And of course, venture capitalists aren't really that venturesome. And So what we've done is had private investors, but we've also launched, as you mentioned, a start engine. This is something new to us, but I've been following this space for quite a while. And it's an SEC sanctioned mechanism that what are called non-qualified investors. This is your people without a couple $1 million in a bank account. Can go in and invest in your company and get equity. So this is a really interesting mechanism. And so we launched this about a week ago with the idea that, one, bringing in money, but also demonstrating lay interest in having a vaccine to prevent it. So the more people that sign up and say they want to see this happen, the better for us.
And is there a minimum that someone has to put up?
Yeah, its minimum is $500.
Okay. But you said this gives the layman's person, the Jane Doe, the John Doe out there that isn't a super wealthy person who can't write a check for a couple millions of dollars to participate in this, get equity. But also we know how dogs tug at our heartstrings and how much they mean to us. So this is where, and hopefully this podcast, we're going to spread this like you can't believe to everywhere and everywhere where people will hear about it and see about it and say, hey, I want to take part in this. I want to contribute. I want to be a part of this. And just such a great effort. And hopefully, you're appealing to the masses versus just the high powered, monster money people that may have other priorities.
Yeah. Well, we're taking it to the people that should be most motivated to it. But, I would recommend you go just look at Start Engine anyway, regardless, because it's interesting the range of companies that are fundraising by this mechanism.
I can imagine a variety of industries, probably every
Everything,
walk of life.
Building prefab houses to a new way to make coffee.
Right.
So.
And if they could throw $500 million at Fisker, the automotive venture that went out under twice, they could put some money to dogs. I think a lot better. I'm going to bring up some props here. And why don't you tell everybody what we have, and maybe they could see it a little bit and get a little visual.
Sure.
And tell us exactly what we have here. And I'm going to put this right in front of the camera. So I think that's a good angle right there. I'm going to adjust that and tell us what we have right here.
If you walked into Intel maybe 20 years ago, you would see a machine that looked like this that was making computer chips. But we took that machine, took out the insides, and refigured the whole thing to our specifications to now do biology, chemistry on it. And this is the part that shines the light. It's called photolithography that makes your chips. Interestingly, Intel does 18 steps to make these wafers into the chips they need. We do 280 steps. So we're the only people in the world that have built this machine and can do that many steps in synthesis.
Okay. And this is right here on the...
No, it's actually down in Tempe, where we have a separate production facility for the chips.
Okay, great. And I'm going to bring up another slide. I think this slide here is a great summary for people to I want you to speak to and elaborate on. And I think this just tells the story, and we'll give it the best possible camera angle you can. Why don't you start off and tell us what we have here?
So this is a summary of the clinical trial that we did to test the vaccine to prevent cancer. It was done at 3 of the leading clinical sites, dog oncology sites in the world. And it turned out it was the biggest interventional trial ever run in dogs. And it took 5 years. No one had ever done a trial like this before, and we were doing it by the seat of our pants. Interestingly, we couldn't get funding for it, but Open Philanthropy Foundation, which is a Facebook-based foundation, found us and said they wanted to fund this trial out of the blue. So we're very lucky in that.
Well, that's good. But that's part of the point of me doing this podcast. My goal is to spread the word about Calviri. That's what we want. We want all kinds of eyeballs and ears on this. The more people that know about it, see about it, hear about it, the better chance we're going to have to, get funding.
Well, not only just funding, because the next trial we're going to do will not enroll 800, but at least 4,000 bucks.
Wow.
And we want to start that next year. And we plan to have a major part of that recruitment done in the valley. Okay. Because there are 1 million dogs in this valley.
Phoenix Arizona is a very dog friendly.
Highest dog ownership rate of any major city in the United States.
I did not know that. Yeah. And it's 114. We're going to be 114 guys today on the blacktop. We're in downtown Phoenix. We're not on the burbs. It's going to be 114 degrees today. And even with that, we love our dogs here. Absolutely. And so that's great. So that new study is going to start in calendar 25?
Yeah, we have to go through the USDA to get approval for the clinical trial design and the composition of the vaccine. We hope to start that this fall, and then start the manufacturing of the vaccine and allow commercial sales next year.
And this trial, I'm assuming like the vaccine would take place at your local veterinarian's office. Like certain vets are going to be part of this network. How would people want to, if they say, hey, I want to participate in this trial, I want my dog to be part of this, how would they get involved with that?
So we'll send out announcements, and we'll have both through the network, social networks, and we'll have it through vets offices like brochures, where people will have to get online, sign a consent form to have their dog enrolled, and have a data package where they understand what the trial would entail. And then if they do, they would log in, and then we would schedule them to come in for
and I think you brought up a great point earlier as we're kind of, we'll wind this down a little bit. Safety first. I mean, you concluded there was no risk, the risks were mitigated to the dogs. I mean, they were all safe. There were no side effects, and everything was safe to administer this trial to these dogs, correct?
Yes. So that safety is always the biggest issue with any treatment that you're going to do with a dog, whether it's preventative or therapeutic. But it's particularly important because, as I said before, we're going to be giving these to dogs that don't have cancer. Many of them, especially if they're younger, they're perfectly healthy.
Right.
So you don't want to have a vaccine do any harm.
Sure.
So we tested this vaccine composition in hundreds of mice first to make sure it didn't work.
Okay.
And actually, I even took the vaccine before we started the trial.
Really?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to assure the owners that this was safe. So,
kudos to you. That's a man of your word. I mean, that's impressive. I mean,
well, I bark occasionally, but other than that,
right. And the dog does not need to wear a mask during this, correct?
No.
Right. We're not putting a mask on a dog, but no, that's great. Like I say, guys, when I learned of Stefan and Calviri, as I live here in Phoenix, or in Scottsdale, just right outside of Phoenix, this caught my attention. I'm a dog lover. You've seen a lot of my content with Archie. We love our dogs. And I said, wow, the word has to get out. I mean, the masses have to learn about this effort and what could be. So I spoke with Stefan. He was kind enough to have me here, and we think we're putting out some great information. As we wrap this up, what would be your final message you would want to get out to both potential funders, people that would fund this, as well as some larger entities that want to partner with Calviri, whether from the biotech world, the life sciences world, the canine world, the corporate world, partners? What would be your message? Aside from, and I like the fact that it's simple, because I'm very simple, end cancer. That's it. Prevent it to begin with, but you have products that would treat and detect as well. What would be your final comments or closing words you want to get out to everybody?
I think the thing that's most important about our company and most distinctive, not only that we can make a vaccine to prevent cancer, the products we make are affordable. So they can be afforded by people with dogs, and they could be afforded by people worldwide. And I think we're the only company that specifically is trying to make cancer products for worldwide markets.
I think that's great, because I mean, too often you hear about some of these, whether it was pills, and I forgot his last name. His first name was Martin. He went to prison because he was exorbitantly just gouging people something like thousands of dollars per pill for, I think, a chemotherapy pill. And then he was a bad person and he got what he deserved. But the moral of the story is, you hear of these drugs that are medications that are so expensive and so cost prohibitive, people could never take them. The affordability factor, that's fantastic.
Yeah, that's our signature.
That's great. Well, thank you very much. I think
for having me on.
No, this is great. This is near and dear to our hearts as dog owners and dog lovers. And I'm gonna spread this like wildfire, guys. Bad metaphor to use in Phoenix in the summer.
Yeah.
Right, I know. But we're gonna get the word out. We want Calviri to be on the top of everybody's minds. And if you're a dog lover and you want to be part of a great cause, you need to check this out and help these guys reach their goals. So That's going to do it for today. We're going to put all the Calviri information, all the links below. We stay tuned for the next episode, and we will, like I said, have some great efforts on the part of Calviri going forward. Take care, guys.
Thank you.
That's going to do it for today's episode of Steve Means Business. Be sure to subscribe and share this podcast with all your friends. Keep a heads up for episodes every week.